Hey everyone, this is Mike and welcome to my guide to macros in Final Fantasy XIV. In this video I'm going to be showing you the do's and the don'ts of macros, kind of also show you how to build your own macros if you want to do so, and where they can be very useful and that kind of stuff. So first of all, the do's and don'ts. When we're talking about stuff that you do not want to do with macros, it is more complicated things, or for example chaining together combos. Something that you don't want to do because macros in Final Fantasy are actually very bad and they are very clunky to use as well, which is the reason why you kind of want to limit the amount of actions that you're going to be doing with macros, or the amount of macros that you're going to be using. I have a few on some of the different jobs that I play, but I try to limit the amount of macros that I use quite a bit. Now of course, when we're talking about crafting more specifically, that's where macros are very useful, especially if we want to just automate crafts and stuff like that. When it comes down to battle content, you do want to try to limit the usage of macros as much as possible, especially when it comes to using certain actions. Now when it comes to some other stuff, like for example off global cooldown usages, when I look at tanks, Shirk is probably one of the major ones there. It can be extremely useful because of how it all works together. So let's kind of take a look at how macros are built, and then I'll also show you how to make your own as well, to maybe do some other custom stuff. So if we go to user macros right here, you can basically see all of the macros. One of the annoying things is that you can't drag these around, so if I want to like replace where they are, can't do that, which is kind of unfortunate. But other than that, you can just make all your macros right here. So for example, I'm on tank, so Shirk is one of the macros that I would recommend people that tank to go get, because it is so incredibly useful. And since the changes in Shadowbringers, you're never going to be shirking anyone that isn't your co-tank, so you can basically make this and you'll never have to think about targeting someone for Shirk ever again. So the way the macro is built up is very simple. The M icon, Shirk, which is the first line, will transform this icon into the Shirk icon. And then over here, AC Shirk will mean that I'm going to be using the action Shirk, and then this is my target, which is the second person in the party list. So this will basically make it so that when I press the Shirk macro, it is always going to be shirking the second person in the party, which when you're doing 8-man content is going to be my co-tank. You can also use this for some other stuff, like for example Nascent Flesh 2, for example Heart of Stone 2, so if you're playing a tank, this can be very useful. Now of course, it's not only for tanks that macros can be useful like this. For example, say with Dragon Sight, can be good as well. The reason why you might want to macro your Dragon Sight is because depending on, and for example, if you're playing on PlayStation, this can be very useful, because on PlayStation it's a lot more annoying to start targeting different people in your party list. So what you can do, for example, say you want to target the 6th person on your party list, because that's probably the second melee, then you just change the thing in between these brackets to 6, and now it will target that party member. Say for example you need the 7th person, you switch that to 7. But say you're playing on PC and you might want to change the target that you Dragon Sight depending on burst windows, you might want to use the mouse over command. This will make it so that when you mouse over that person in the party list, it is going to give your Dragon Sight to that person, which can be very useful if you want to just target different people, or for example you play a lot in Party Finder and you'll have to adjust your macros on the fly in there as well. So either you make one that selects a certain specific party member at all times using the number that I showed off before, or you can use a mouse over macro if you want to just like tether different people, for example. Another reason why you might want to do this as a macro rather than just click on them, use the action and then tab back into the boss, is because when you're clicking on that party member, your auto attacks stop. And then of course you can start losing auto attacks over the course of the fight like that. Now of course I do know that this is very highly optimized stuff if you're already thinking about like keeping uptime of your auto attacks, but it is still a thing that you can do regardless. Now of course that's not everything, because there's also stuff that we can do with targetable AoEs and stuff like that. So if I go on my ninja real quick, Ninja has this cool action called Sukuchi. Now with Sukuchi, normally what you do is you press it, you get your targeted thingy, and then you press it again, and then you go to that location. Now as you can see, I have a Sukuchi macro over here, and what this does is it is going to make me Sukuchi towards a target. So if I normally press this, it's not going to be doing anything. As you can see, I am pressing my macro down here, it's not doing anything. But when I click, for example, on the striking dummy, and I now press the macro, it's going to Sukuchi me to that striking dummy. So it can make it a little bit easier If, for example, say you want to do it for uptime rather than just like teleporting around the arena, then you can use a macro to just jump to a target. You can also, of course, target party members with this if you want to do so. But if you want to just manually target it, then using the normal Sakuchi action, well, I don't have a charge right now, but that would be better. But for example, with other stuff like ground targetable AoEs, this can be pretty useful as well. So say, for example, I am on my Dark Knight. As you can see, I have 2 actions for my Salted Earth. Now, one more thing, if you're not sure which of these 2 is your macro, the macro will always have this little cog icon on the top right of it. And when you're hovering over it, it also won't display the like the flavor text, I guess you could say. Like, for example, if I hover over Shirk, this doesn't do it either. Now, what this one for Dark Knight is going to be doing is it is going to use Salted Earth on the target. So if I normally, again, want to use Salted Earth, I get this targeting thing, which I'm going to right click. And then if I press my macro, it's not going to do anything. But if I, for example, target a striking dummy, now it is going to just put the Salted Earth on there. This is very useful for when you're doing double weave stuff or something like that. Or again, you're like losing track of where your mouse is, because, for example, I always right click my mouse so that I can like just maneuver my camera, and then sometimes my mouse will be like in the top right, and then when I come back I'm like, oh shit, where is my mouse? Then stuff like this, macroing it, you could just press it, and you don't even have to worry about where your mouse is, or you won't have to click twice, because sometimes double weaving something like Salted Earth can be annoying, because you like click the action, click on the floor, and then maybe that will have like lost you your double weaving opportunity or something like that. Gonna de-aggro the striking dummy real quick, run away a bit. But those are kind of like some things that you can use certain macros for. Now, of course, that's not everything. Say, for example, you're playing a healer and you want to res a party member, or say, for example, 2 people died and you're playing in Party Finder, so you're not on voice comms with your co-healer. What you can do is make a macro for it. So, for example, I'll go on my Scholar and we'll make a raise macro. So let's start it from the top. So we select a new one. I think this is called Resurrection. Yes, it is. Bam, Resurrection. Well, I mistyped that. Let's just call it Res. And then we start from the top. So first icon, and then we type in Resurrection. Of course, see that we type it correctly. Resurrection. There we go. Enter, and now the icon has changed to the res symbol. Then we go /action. I'm just gonna copy paste this. Resurrection. And then we are going to use T, because we are going to be targeting the party member that we want to res. And then we're going to make it so that we are going to say something in party chat. So say /p resing this person, target. I'm going to make it into FC chat because I'm not in a party at the moment, so you won't be able to see it, and I don't think there's anyone online in my FC at the moment, so it doesn't matter if I spam the FC chat. So when I now use this on my hotbar, and for example the striking dummy just died, and I press my Alt-C button, resing striking dummy, as you can see. Or for example, you can also make it with a sound, so let's say SE5 or something, sound effect 5. Then if I press this now, I'm going to be, oh wait, oops, I'm still in the chat here. Resing striking dummy, sound effect 5. Something like that, for example. Like I have this over here as well, sound effect 6. Sound effect 5 here. So that's kind of like how you can make those macros. You can of course do some other stuff with it, like for example using limit break something, and then if like some stupid image go into the chat or something like that, you can do that stuff too. But those are basically some stuff that you can do with party macros. Of course, for example, if you're playing tank and you want to just like have a pull macro, this is mine for example. I just like danger bomb goes dum 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 dum, and then the countdown will start. Or for example, pulling the boss in 20 seconds, something like that. And then this echo end thingy over here is to reset my parser, because I'm somebody that does use ACT. Oh my god, there's party tools. But yeah, this will reset the ACT, but basically if you just want a pull macro /party pulling in 20 seconds or something like that, and then CD20, or say pulling in 10 seconds and then CD10, something like that, that will work as well. So I'm gonna change this to FC real quick. And then if I press my macro, There you go, battle commencing in 20 seconds. So I'm gonna make that back to party before I spam my FC next time I go raid. But those are a couple of things that you can do. In my opinion, Shirk and stuff is one of the easier ones. Stuff like Aurora, Heart of Stone, those things for your tanks can be pretty useful as well, so you don't always have to select your co-tank when you want to use your intervention, your Blackest Night, stuff like that. And then for ground targeted AoEs, this can also be very useful. Of course, if the boss is going to be moving, then you want to still manually place it. But when, for example, like the boss is going to stay stationary, like E2 Savage, for example, or E3 Savage, you can use something like this, and this will just place it on the boss's hitbox, and it will stay there. So these can be pretty useful. Some other stuff you could do as well, for example, say you're playing Scholar and you want to macro your change stratagem so your party knows when you're going to be using it. You could do a /AC chain stratagem and then /party using chain increase crit rate for, what is it, 20 seconds or so, or for 15 seconds. Something like that if you would want to do so. Now let's move over to the second part and take a look at crafters. So when it comes down to crafting, you of course have a lot of different actions that you can use, and sometimes keeping track of everything that you're doing can be a little bit daunting, especially for newer players, but that is why we can macro our actions. So for example, this is my pot macro. I have two different ones for this one because one macro is not enough. A macro can only have a maximum of 15 lines in there, so you can't just macro a huge segment, so to speak. Basically the way this works is this is basically like a combo macro. Now since we are not in a battle, combo macros do work because we're not pressing other buttons, we're not moving around, we're not using off global cooldowns and that kind of stuff. We're also not repositioning a boss because that can also kind of fuck over the normal macro when it comes down to combat classes. But when it comes down to a crafter, this works a lot better. So what we do is we use our actions, like for example Reflect, Manipulation, Ingenuity, but we also add a wait time at the end of this. The reason why we do this is because each action that we take, not only as a crafter, but for example if you were to do like a combo macro for your battle classes as well, and this is the reason why you don't want to do it, there is a GCD. Now when you remember your normal GCD on combat classes, for example if I switch back to my Grumbreaker, it's 2.40 seconds. Or for example if I go on to, well, I don't have Huton now, but for example if I use my Huton on Ninja, you can see that I have a 2.9 or 2.09 second recast. So waiting 3 seconds is going to make it so that my combo is not going to just go 1, 2, 3, but that it will be like 1, 2, 3. So that's why you don't want to do that basically. But on crafters that doesn't really matter, because with crafters you don't want to just like, you don't really have a combo that you want to keep going or something like that. So that's why this is possible. Now when it comes down to crafting, we have two different wait timings. We have wait 3 for what would be your GCDs, and we have wait 2 for what would be your off GCDs, so to speak. So meaning that whenever you increase the quality or the progress of your of the thing that you're crafting, you want to wait 3 seconds, and when you're using a buffing thing, you want to wait 2 seconds. So that's why, for example, Ingenuity, Manipulation, these are buffs. Those are waiting 2 seconds, but then for example Delicate Synthesis, these are things that increase progress and quality of your thing that you're crafting. You want to wait 3 seconds. So I'll show this off real quick. I'm gonna craft a Tincture of Intelligence. So I go to Synthesize, and then for example here, Pots, execute macro 1, and then my character will start crafting just like that. And then the sequel or the sequence that I made here in the macro is going to be executed, and then by the time that we reach the end, it's going to put a message in the chat saying macro 1 finished, and then also a sound effect. So for example if I alt tab out of the game, it'll basically show that as well. So if I go here on my general tab, you can see that my character is now crafting, and we are about to reach the end of the first macro. One more action. And then as you can see, macro 1 finished, and then I got a little sound effect saying that I can now use the second part of the macro, so I can execute. And then there we go. That is going to finish the craft for me. So for example, if you're crafting, these kind of macros can be very useful. I don't have to remember anything of the crafting rotation that I just did. I just press the 2 buttons and it takes care of it itself for me. Of course, when you're using macros to craft, it's not as good as manually crafting stuff because you can't make use of procs. For example, if your finisher ends on a poor proc, you're also going to cry because then you might not get the maximum amount of quality out of the item that you want. So it's not all positive stuff, but it does make crafting a whole lot easier and a lot more brain dead, I guess you could say. So those are kind of like the different macros that I like to use. For example, like this was some other stuff that I made for some random stuff to make as well. But yeah, that's pretty much macros for crafting. I would definitely recommend people to use them because it is really useful if you don't want to remember all of the different crafting rotations for the different items and pieces of gear that you're going to be making. And then when it comes down to combat classes, I mainly recommend you use stuff like this. For example, like Nascent Flesh, Second Party Member, Shirk, stuff like Salted Earth. This also works with White Mage's thingy, Asylum, for example, works with that as well. Stuff like that. And then, for example, if you're playing a lot of a healer and you want to res a person, you can just be like /P, resing, target, come back to life or something, I don't know, so that your co-healer knows that you are resing that person and that they can maybe res somebody else or save the mana, something like that, so that you don't res the same person twice. So that's pretty much kind of my guide to macros. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask them in the comments or hop into my Discord and ask me over there because I'm usually online over there as well. But yeah, that's pretty much gonna be it for me. I hope it was helpful and I'll see you in the next one.